In the dead of night, an 18-year-old embarks on a solitary journey towards college. Nerves and anxiety consume him as he drives through deserted, dark roads. Loneliness surrounds him, broken only by the occasional dim glow of passing car headlights. After hours on the road, his nearly empty gas tank forces him to stop at a sinister, abandoned gas station in the middle of nowhere. There, a strange man suddenly appears close by, with a dark look and a sinister smile. The stranger warns him to take a mysterious path, sending a chill down the young man's spine. Despite his intuition screaming to avoid that path, he decides to ignore the stranger's warning and continue on his journey. As he drives down the dark, desolate road, a mysterious vehicle follows him closely, its headlights off, disappearing and reappearing in the darkness. Suddenly, the calm of the night is shattered by blaring sirens and blinding lights. A truck appears in front of him, blocking his path, while masked and armed men emerge from all directions, their emotionless eyes fixed on the defenseless young man inside the car. Panic grips him, his heart pounding wildly as he maneuvers his vehicle in a desperate attempt to escape the sinister ambush. The relentless chase drives him to the edge of terror, with the feeling that evil is closer than he ever imagined. The young man's frantic flight down the dark road echoes with the sound of fear in his mind, adrenaline and horror blending in a battle for survival amid dark forces beyond his control. What awaits him beyond the curve of the deserted road? The viewer finds themselves captivated by the suspense, hair standing on end, and breath held, immersed in a world of inexplicable and palpable terror. Barely escaping the ambush of the masked men, the young man finds himself in a desperate flight down the dark and surreal road. His eyes fixed on the rearview mirror, he barely notices the ghostly presence of his pursuers disappearing into the darkness. His heart races uncontrollably as the world around him seems to distort into twisted shapes of fear and despair. The uncertainty of what awaits him in the shadows of the night fills him with deep terror, the sound of the pursuer's footsteps echoing agonizingly in his ears. With his mind gripped by chaos and adrenaline, the young man finds himself plunged into a desperate fight for survival, his instincts of self-preservation tested to the limit. Every turn on the dark road seems to hide new dangers, every shadow becoming an imminent threat of destruction and doom. The feeling of being hunted like a defenseless prey consumes him, bringing forth his worst fears and nightmares. With each ragged breath and each rapid heartbeat, the young man finds himself on the brink of absolute terror, his vision distorted by the imminent fear enveloping him like a shroud. As the dark night wraps his soul in a cold embrace, the young man finds himself battling not only against his physical pursuers, but against the dark shadows that seem to writhe and stir around him, whispering promises of anguish and despair in the depths of the endless night. He is left at a crossroads between life and death, the line between reality and madness dissolving before his terrified eyes. With his mind still pulsing with shock and terror, the young man finally spots the distant glow of lights, indicating a new dawn. He remembers his next stop, a hotel he had booked for the night, a brief refuge in the middle of his journey. Arriving at the location, he almost locks the car haphazardly and heads to the reception, his hands trembling and his mind still disconnected from the horror experienced on the road. The hotel is small and eerily old-fashioned, with long, narrow corridors that echo with every sound, no matter how small. The receptionist, a stern-looking lady, hands over the room key with a look that seems to pierce his soul. He thanks her with a nod, climbing the creaky wooden stairs that add a new level of unease. In the deserted corridor, the young man feels like he is being watched, the sensation of invisible eyes following his every move. Upon opening the door to his room, he is enveloped by a sense of déjà vu, as if he had been there before under darker circumstances. He locks the door behind him, feeling momentarily safe. The room is small and decorated with antique furniture that seems to whisper stories of past eras. He collapses onto the bed, exhausted, but sleep does not come. Instead, his mind continues to replay the scenes of the chase, the eyes of the masked men burning in his memory. Every sound, every shadow seems to bring back the terror, preventing him from finding peace. And then he hears it. First, a barely audible whisper coming from the other side of the wall. Then, faint footsteps in the hallway, as if someone is slowly approaching. His heart races again, and he rises from the bed, body paralyzed with fear. Slowly approaching the door, he peeks through the peephole, but sees nothing but the empty, dimly lit corridor. But he feels the presence. Something or someone is out there, waiting, watching. The silence is crushing, and he retreats from the door, moving to the center of the room. Panic begins to set in again as he realizes that despite the lock, he is not truly safe. The shadows seem to come to life, slowly stretching towards him, as if trying to grab him and pull him into the depths of the unknown. That night, the young man discovers that even a seemingly safe haven can transform into a living nightmare, where the barriers between reality and terror disintegrate, leaving him at the mercy of the dark forces surrounding him. As the shadows seem to lengthen across the room, making the atmosphere even more oppressive, the young man forced himself to stay calm. He opened his backpack, searching for his cell phone. With trembling hands, he managed to turn it on, the screen's light a beacon in the growing darkness. Without thinking twice, he dialed the police, reporting the chase he had suffered, trying to convey the urgency and fear that laced his voice. As he ended the call, he heard a distinct sound of faint scratching of wood, as if someone was passing something under the door. Slowly, he approached again, and against all his instincts, peeked through the peephole a second time. This time, he glimpsed a dark figure standing next to the door, dim enough to almost blend with the corridor's shadows. In the darkness, a sliver of light emerged under the door. A note was pushed through. The young man bent down, picked up the note with anxious fingers, and opened it. The scribbled words were hard to read at first, but when he managed to decipher them, a chill ran down his spine. "You're not safe here. They will find you. Leave now." The distant sound of approaching sirens offered a spark of hope, but the warning in the note pressed heavily on his mind. He knew he needed to act quickly. Grabbing his belongings, he headed for the window. Cautiously opening it, he realized there was no easy escape. He was on the second floor, and the fall, though not fatal, could leave him vulnerable. The sound of sirens grew louder, and a flash of red and blue lights broke the oppressive darkness of the room. He knew he couldn't wait any longer. With one last look at the room now saturated with shadows, the young man gathered his courage and pushed himself out the window, landing with a thud on the hard ground below. The pain from the fall coursed through his body, but he couldn't stop. Crawling and stumbling to his feet, he began to run, moving as quickly as his body would allow towards the flashing lights of the police cars. The officers, initially surprised, quickly moved to intercept him, realizing he was the young man who had called. With a heavy sigh of relief and exhaustion, he finally allowed himself to slow down, enveloped in the relative safety of the sirens and lights. However, even with the presence of the police, a horrible question lingered in his mind. What if the shadowy figures were more than just humans? What if they were something else? The night still held secrets to reveal, and though he was momentarily safe, the young man knew that the true nature of his pursuit was far from fully understood. A battle between the light of reason and the shadows of fear rumbled within him, and that night seemed only the prelude to something far more sinister and profound. As he approached the police officers, they surrounded him in a protective circle. One of them, a woman with a serious but compassionate look, started asking rapid questions about what had happened. He tried to explain as best he could, but his words came out fragmented by panic and exhaustion. They listened intently, exchanging worried glances as they tried to piece together his disjointed account. Suddenly, a metallic sound echoed in the distance, like a heavy object being dragged. Everyone turned towards the sound, their expressions hardening. One of the officers raised their flashlight, illuminating the dark stretch of road. The flickering light revealed only dancing shadows and trees swaying gently in the wind. But the young man knew something was there, watching, waiting. "We need to get him to a safe place now," said the officer, adopting a more defensive stance. They escorted the young man to a patrol car, placing him in the back seat while more officers spread out, their flashlights slicing through the darkness like blades. The ride to the station was tense and silent, with the young man's eyes constantly darting to the window, searching for any sign of pursuit. When they arrived, he was taken to a small interrogation room. There, he finally had a chance to breathe a little more freely, away from the immediate threats of the shadows. However, as he sat in the cold room, illuminated by fluorescent lights, he realized that the unease hadn't disappeared. That warning in the note continued to echo in his mind. "They will find you." A few minutes later, the same officer who had questioned him outside entered the room, closing the door behind her. She sat across from him, maintaining a calm but firm tone. "We need to know exactly who these people are that are after you and why. Any detail can help," she said. He tried to recall everything that had happened over the past few weeks. The arrival of strange letters, the shadowy figures appearing at night, the growing feeling of being watched. He told the officer everything, leaving nothing out, no matter how absurd it seemed. As he spoke, the officer took notes on every detail, her eyes fixed on him with unwavering focus. When he finished, she sighed deeply and leaned back in her chair. "We'll put officers in the area to maintain constant surveillance," she stated. "But you need to understand if these people are so dangerous." She stopped as she saw something through the interrogation room window. In the darkness beyond the glass, a silhouette passed quickly, almost imperceptibly. But it was enough to stir the tense atmosphere again. The officer stood up, gesturing urgently to her colleagues in the hallway. "Lock down the main entrances. No one comes in or out." The young man felt panic surge back, tightening his chest. That night seemed never-ending, the sense that the shadows had crossed the barrier and were now closer than ever, inside the station itself. Everything indicated he was being hunted by something beyond comprehension, and even within a building full of police, the danger was palpable and terrifyingly real. The tension in the station was almost tangible. Officers moved quickly, blocking entrances and searching every corner for the mysterious presence the young man had mentioned. He felt like an island of vulnerability amidst all the activity. The officer returned to the room, now with an even more rigid posture. "We're taking you to a safe place. Somewhere more secure," she said, signaling for him to follow. They exited through the back door of the station, getting into an unmarked car waiting outside. Two other officers joined them, weapons ready, vigilant. The drive was short and silent, leading them to an apparently ordinary building, but one clearly reinforced with robust security. Inside the secure building, the young man was taken to a more comfortable room, equipped with sofas and a small table. He sat down, and the officer joined him, trying to offer some comfort. "We're doing everything we can to protect you. We'll find out who's after you and why," she promised. At that moment, the officer's phone rang. She answered quickly, her expression shifting from relief to unease. "Understood? We're coming right now." Hanging up, she looked at the young man intently. "It seems we've found something. We need to take you to our operations center. There's something you need to see." Guided by officers, the young man was led through more corridors to a room filled with monitors and computers. A technician was waiting for them, turning with a grave expression. "We managed to access some traffic cameras from the area where you were pursued," he said. "You need to see this." The images began to play on the screens. At first, they were normal frames of a deserted road, but then something changed. 4 masked figures appeared, moving with almost mechanical precision, coordinating each step as if controlled by a hive mind. But the most disturbing part came next. One of the figures looked directly at one of the cameras, and the eyes behind the mask glowed unnaturally, as if there was an internal light. The young man recoiled, feeling the horror swell inside him again. "They're not human," he murmured, the words escaping before he could stop them. "We're investigating this," said the officer, clearly disturbed by what they were seeing. "But we need you to remember anything else, any detail. It could be crucial." He closed his eyes, trying to sift through his memories. That glow in the pursuer's eyes, the enigmatic letter, the constant feeling of being watched. There was something strange about their eyes, like there was a light, something unnatural, he finally said. "And the letters. They always had symbols I couldn't understand." The technician approached with a clipboard, asking him to draw the symbols as best as he could remember. When he finished, he showed them to the team, who began comparing them with files on occult symbolism and cryptography. Finally, the officer turned to him, a renewed determination in her eyes. "We'll do everything we can, but you'll be transferred to a more remote and secure location until we resolve this." As he was hurried away once more, the young man couldn't shake the feeling that they were only scratching the surface of something much deeper and more terrifying. The battle between light and shadows was just beginning, and he was an involuntary piece in a much larger, darker game than he had ever imagined. Under the protection of the special unit, the young man was driven to a secret base located in a rural area, far from the city's lights and the shadows that haunted it. The journey, though long and winding, was carried out in tense silence, with every jolt of the car heightening the sense of uncertainty. When they arrived, he was led into an underground bunker. The place was functional but intimidating, with its thick concrete walls and narrow corridors lit by fluorescent lights. Soldiers and agents were everywhere, working with high-tech equipment and sifting through information. In the main operations room, monitors displayed maps, reports, and drone footage. The officer, whose name he finally learned was Sarah, was waiting for him alongside a group of specialists. "Here, we'll be out of reach of those figures," she said, trying to sound reassuring. One of the specialists, a man in military attire with an urgent demeanor, approached. "We need you to review some images and records. Any detail you can recognize or remember could be the key." The monitors began to display a sequence of videos. Some showed more of the masked figures acting in different locations. Others displayed the symbols he had drawn, comparing them with archaeological and esoteric references. Suddenly, he froze, seeing an image that was painfully familiar. That symbol, he pointed to one of the monitors. It was on the letters. Sometimes it had a faint glow around it, like it was alive. The specialists exchanged significant looks. "That's an ancient symbol related to summoning rituals used in certain cultures to bring entities from other dimensions," explained the military specialist. "We're beginning to understand that you're not just being pursued by people, but perhaps by something that was summoned." Sarah turned to him, concern clear in her eyes. "This means we need to broaden our approach. It's not just a matter of security, but also of combating this force. As they discussed strategies, the young man couldn't shake the feeling that something was imminently wrong. Even with all the security and technology around him, the threat seemed to be closing in, as if it were inevitable. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and an alarm began to blare. Soldiers and agents moved swiftly, taking positions and readying their weapons. One of the monitors displayed a hooded figure outside, moving with the confidence of someone who knew every step. Sarah turned urgently. "How did they find us so fast?" The military specialist responded quickly. "Maybe they never lost the connection. We need to evacuate to the innermost zone." now rushed through a labyrinth of corridors and armored doors. The young man felt fear bubbling up again. The sound of footsteps echoing on the concrete, urgent instructions over the radio, all added to the oppressive weight of the situation. Finally, they reached a reinforced room, where thick doors closed automatically behind them. Inside, some agents continued monitoring the situation, while Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the young man. "We're preparing for the worst-case scenario," she said, her voice tense but steady. "We'll know more about who or what is after us soon. But I want you to know, you're not alone in this. We'll fight this together." Amid the chaos, that promise brought a glimmer of comfort. However, he knew the real battle was still to come, a fight against shadows that seemed to defy physical or technological barriers. And as the alarm continued to blare, the persistent doubt lingered in his mind whether any place could truly be safe from such a mysterious and relentless force. The incessant alarm was like a constant beat of panic, piercing the tense silence of the reinforced room. Inside, everyone maintained an extreme vigilance, eyes glued to monitors and ears pricked for any unusual sound. Sarah and the military specialist exchanged quick plans, sketching strategies while other agents began to surround the young man, trying to ensure his safety. A sense of imminence spread through the environment, the notion that confrontation was inevitable. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, and a radio transmission crackled, conveying the tense voice of an agent on the front line. "We have an intruder." He breached the first barrier, mobilizing containment. The monitors showed the hooded figure the young man had spotted before. It moved with supernatural agility, dodging attacks and advancing as if it knew exactly where to go. The cameras only captured fleeting shadows, as if every move was designed to avoid full capture. Sarah turned to him with an urgent expression. "You need to tell us if there's anything more. Any connection, any detail about these figures that might give us an advantage." He closed his eyes, trying to scour his memory again. The scene from that night, the glow in their eyes, the faintly glowing symbols, the indistinct murmurs that sometimes surrounded him. And then, a painfully clear memory surfaced. He gripped Sarah's arm tightly. They constantly murmured the same thing, like a mantra, "Lux umbra revelat." The light reveals the shadow. The military specialist listened to this, his expression thoughtful. This could be a clue. If these entities are summoned by shadows, maybe light is a weakness. We need to explore this immediately. As they made adjustments, increasing strategic lighting in all corridors and key points, another alarm blared stridently. The young man knew the confrontation was now at its most critical stage. Outside the reinforced room, sounds of confrontation echoed gunfire, objects clashing, and shouted orders among the agents. The bunker, which once seemed like an impenetrable fortress, now felt like a fragile trap. A thud resonated, and the hooded figure managed to penetrate further. The strategic lights flickered and increased in intensity, trying to blind or disorient the intruders. Momentarily, a vital flash revealed the distorted features of the hooded face, inhuman, with intensely glowing eyes. The agents attacked with everything they had, but the figure kept advancing, relentless. Sarah pulled the young man back, shielding him as the confrontation intensified around them. "Lux umbra revelat," shouted one of the specialists, activating a series of ultraviolet lights strategically placed along the corridor. In an instant, the figure stopped, writhing as if being burned by each ray of light. There was a horrific scream, and the shadow that seemed to impregnate the figures began to dissipate, revealing pale skin and lifeless eyes. One by one, the invaders seemed to lose their strength, collapsing to the ground, writhing until they were motionless. The persistent alarm finally ceased, replaced by a heavy, panting silence. The battle seemed to have ended, but the sense that this was just a small victory lingered. Sarah sighed in relief, staying vigilant. "We've managed to fend off this threat for now, but we need to understand more about why they're after you," she said, turning to the young man, who was still pale and trembling. The military specialist approached, marked by shadows and sweat, but with a determined glint. "We'll delve deeper into these symbols and mantras. There's more to discover, and we won't stop until this threat is completely neutralized." As relative calm returned, the young man knew safety was transient. Layers of mystery were unfolding before them, and the real battle against the shadows was just beginning. And so, surrounded by vigilant allies and relying on their strength, he accepted that he would need to dig deeper into the unknown, facing the terrors that hid not just in the shadows, but in the very lights that revealed them. The sound of silence after the battle was filled with tension, each breath seeming like a note of a fragile agreement, a pause between two acts of a sinister opera. Sarah, visibly exhausted but determined, signaled for the young man to follow her down a brightly lit corridor. They entered a secondary operations room, equipped with high-tech computers and tables covered in documents. In the center of the room, a hologram of the symbols and the contorted faces of the invaders slowly rotated, providing a visual analysis of the enemies. The military specialist, accompanied by a cryptographer and an intelligence analyst, was already examining a new series of data. "We need to understand them more deeply. What do they want, and why are you crucial to this?" he said to the young man. Sarah approached, holding a tablet. "We have some new cryptographic data from the mantras and symbols you mentioned. The mantra, Lux Umbra Revelat, seems to be a key, a sort of invocation or command that activates or deactivates these entities' powers." The cryptographer, a man with glasses and a scrutinizing look, pointed to a complex mathematical formula in the hologram. "These symbols are actually antitheses to certain energy patterns. The ultraviolet light interfered with their frequencies, deactivating their ability to manipulate shadows." The young man, still recovering from the recent horrors, felt a wave of understanding. "Light against darkness," he murmured. "But why me? Why am I in the middle of all this?" The intelligence analyst, a woman with sharp eyes and quick movements, slid a file to him. "Why you? Maybe your past or something you encountered, something you witnessed." He opened the file and saw old photos from his childhood, places he frequented, familiar and unfamiliar faces. One detail stood out, a photo of an old book with the same symbol engraved on the cover. "I know this book," he said with a tone of revelation. "It was a gift from my grandfather. I never understood its purpose, but he always said it was a key to the future." Sarah frowned. An old book with these symbols. It could be a valuable clue. "Where is it now?" "Stored in the basement of my parents' house," the young man replied. "No one else knows about it." The military specialist stood up. "This is huge. We need that book. It might contain answers or at least more clues." A new mission was taking shape. Armed with new knowledge and a clearer direction, the team prepared to retrieve the book. Sarah reinforced the circle of protection around the young man while planning the next move. "We're going on a quick mission," she declared. "But it could be dangerous. We need to be ready for anything." Hours later, the team mobilized to the young man's parents' house. The suburban location seemed a peaceful contrast to the unrest everyone felt. The young man led them to the basement, where he searched for the old book. Finally, he pulled out a dusty, worn leather-bound book with symbols embedded on the cover. He handed it to Sarah, who carefully opened it. Among the pages, alongside the symbols, were illustrations and texts in an ancient language, accompanied by maps and diagrams. The military specialist examined each page closely. We need to take this back to our bunker for a thorough analysis. As they left the house, the young man felt a momentary relief for recovering something crucial from his past. Yet, the weight of what was still to come hung over them like a dark, persistent cloud. Back at the bunker, the analysis of the book began. The experts worked tirelessly, cross-referencing information and expanding their investigations. The young man, now a symbol in a fight of larger proportions, remained under surveillance, understanding that the key to unraveling and defeating the threat lay within the pages of that old book. As they deciphered each symbol and interpretation, the team approached the truth. Closer to the heart of the mystery, they felt the impending final battle looming, ready to confront the shadows with the knowledge they uncovered page by page. The fluorescent lights of the bunker illuminated the aged pages of the book, while the soft sound of keyboards and murmurs filled the room. Experts analyzed each symbol, each diagram, trying to extract as much information as possible. Sarah stood beside the young man, both watching the cryptographer and intelligence analyst work fervently. "We've found something interesting here," said the cryptographer, his hands dancing across keyboards and touchscreens. "These symbols aren't just invocations. They're also a map," he explained. "They point to specific locations that could be energy points, used to strengthen or weaken these entities." The intelligence analyst agreed, pointing to a chart they had generated. "If we can reach these points and interfere with the energies, we might sever these entities' connection to our world." Suddenly, one of the monitors flickered, displaying an intercepted transmission. A masked figure, with the same symbol tattooed on their forehead, began speaking in an ancient language. The cryptographer adjusted the transmission, translating it in real time. "You will not stop the darkness," the voice echoed, malevolent. "The cycle has begun, and it must complete. Lux umbra revelat merely delayed the inevitable." Everyone in the room fell silent, digesting the message. Sarah turned to the young man, her gaze determined. "We need to act fast. Interrupt the cycle before it's too late." The military specialist gathered the team around a large monitor, where map points began to be highlighted. "These are the locations we need to target. We'll need to divide our forces and operate simultaneously." The team split into small groups, each with specific skills and missions. Sarah chose to stay with the young man, knowing he held the key to uncovering more secrets along the way. Equipped and ready, they began to mobilize. Helicopters and specialized vehicles were ready to swiftly move the groups to their destinations. Before they departed, Sarah looked at the young man, giving him a reassuring yet firm promise. "We will succeed. Trust us and trust yourself." The young man nodded, feeling a mix of fear and determination. Their journey took them to remote regions and hidden locales, where each group faced different challenges. Sarah and the young man pushed through a dense forest, following the book's map, which pointed to an ancient ruin covered in moss and vines. The sounds of nature around them were a chilling contrast to the events they were about to face. They arrived at a clearing where an ancient altar stood, adorned with runes and familiar symbols. They began preparing the energy disruption ritual detailed in the book. Sarah lit torches and arranged crystals strategically, while the young man read aloud from the ancient texts. A cold, eerie wind began to blow through the forest, and a thick shadow formed around the altar, taking the shape of a hooded figure. "You cannot interrupt the cycle." The voice from before echoed through the clearing. The figure advanced, but this time, the young man did not falter. He continued reading, intensifying the book's incantations. Sarah, ready to combat anything, positioned herself beside him. The torches burned brightly, their light warding off the encroaching shadows. With a final word, the young man completed the ritual. Suddenly, A burst of light emanated from the altar, bathing everything in a powerful glow. The hooded figure screamed, its silhouette disintegrating in the light as the shadows around them dissipated. The clearing was enveloped in a comforting brightness, and the wind ceased. Sarah breathed a sigh of relief, turning to the young man with a smile. "You did it." They received transmissions from the other groups, each confirming success in their missions. The cycle of darkness had been interrupted, at least for now. Back at the bunker, the team celebrated their victory, though they knew this was just one battle in a much larger war. The young man felt a newfound strength, a newly discovered purpose. He knew that despite the shadows that might arise, they were now better equipped with knowledge and light to face them. And with Sarah by his side, he was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The atmosphere in the bunker was one of relief mixed with tense anticipation. Victory over the shadows strengthened the team's resolve, but also alerted them to the increasingly greater dangers lurking in the darkness. Sarah looked at the young man, her expression reflecting pride and confidence. "You've surprised us, showing unmatched courage and determination. You're a crucial part of this fight." The military specialist, always pragmatic and vigilant, drew the team's attention. "The battle isn't over. The shadows are still out there, lurking. We need to stay one step ahead, always ready for the next challenge." As the experts prepared new analyses and strategies, the young man felt an inner drive, a deeper connection to the past and the purpose surrounding him. He knew his role in this war of light and shadows was more complex than he imagined, but he was determined to face it head-on. New transmissions and information began to arrive, indicating suspicious movements in different parts of the world. The threat of the shadows was not isolated, and the battle needed to expand to a global scale. Sarah gathered the team, outlining plans to investigate and neutralize shadow activities in various locations. "Each of us has a crucial role to play. Together, we're stronger than any threat that may arise." The young man felt the weight of his role, not just as a pawn in this war, but as a true key player. He knew his connection to the past, to the ancient symbols and knowledge, was a valuable weapon against the forces of darkness. Armed with new information from the book and reinforced strategies, the team split up and embarked on missions around the world. Each faced distinct challenges, yet all were united by the same goal: to keep the light shining against the shadows threatening to engulf the world. As operations progressed and new discoveries were made, the young man felt part of something much larger than himself. Each victory, each challenge overcome, strengthened his determination and his connection with the allies around him. And so, enveloped in ancient mysteries and epic battles, the young man faced his destiny with courage and hope, knowing that his journey was only beginning. In the heart of darkness, the light continued to shine, stronger than ever. With each step forward, he drew closer to understanding his true role in this war of light and shadows. Are you ready to dive into a universe of mysteries, challenges, and thrilling discoveries? Join us and be part of this extraordinary journey by subscribing to our channel right now. Be prepared to be amazed, learn, and connect with something greater than you imagine. Your presence and participation are essential to strengthen our community and face together the shadows that lurk. Start your adventure now.